Get comfortable. Tonight's story is about two strangers on a night train, a thermos of tea, and the things we say at 2 in the morning when we've finally stopped pretending. Leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I read every one. Let's go. Compartment 6, Chapter 1, Boarding. Daniel found his seat 4 minutes before departure, later than he'd meant to, the way things had been going lately. The last several months he'd been late to everything. Not badly late, a few minutes, always just a few, but consistently. Like something in him was resisting arriving on time, resisting being where he was supposed to be. He'd noticed it, but hadn't done anything about it. That felt about right, too. He made his way down the car with his backpack, bumping his shoulder against the luggage racks, found compartment 6, and slid the door open. Inside, there was only a night light, dim, orange, the kind that comes on late when people are sleeping or trying to sleep. A woman was sitting by the window, 40 maybe, hard to see exactly in that light. Her face was tired but not worn out, more the tired that comes from a long time of holding something in, not from missed sleep. Dressed simply, dark sweater, jeans. She'd taken off her shoes. They sat neatly beside the berth. Her hair was loosely pulled back. A few strands escaped, and she hadn't bothered to fix them. She was holding a book, but not reading. She was looking out at the platform, at people saying goodbye under the lamps, at luggage being dragged somewhere. The look of someone thinking about something else entirely. Daniel put his backpack on the upper shelf. Good evening. She turned. Evening. Nothing more. Back to the window. The train lurched once, then again, and slowly began to move. The platform started sliding away. People with raised hands. Lights stretching into streaks and then ending. Outside the window, darkness began, and rain, fine, sideways, barely visible in the passing glow of other trains. Daniel sat down across from her, took out his phone, looked at the screen. 3 unread messages from his ex, 1 from his mother, 2 from work. He didn't want to read any of them. He was tired of words that didn't solve anything, words that filled space without leaving any air in it. He put the phone away. Then he noticed the book. It was lying in her lap, old, with a worn spine and folded down page corners. But that wasn't what caught his attention. Sticking out from between the pages was a bookmark. A small photograph. He couldn't see what was in it, only that it was a photograph and that it had been tucked there the way you tuck things you want to keep close but aren't ready to look at. The train picked up speed. Outside, the rain continued. In the compartment, it was quiet. Just the sound of the wheels, even and monotonous, and a brief echo from a tunnel that came and went. The car swayed gently. Somewhere down the corridor a door swung shut. Someone coming or going. Then quiet again. Just the wheels. Just the rain. Daniel took out his earbuds, put them in, didn't turn anything on, just sat with them in, because earbuds make it easier not to have a conversation. An old trick from college. But the earbuds didn't help. The train hummed on a curve, low, sustained. Outside, the darkness shifted angle and became slightly different. Then the curve ended and everything was straight again, the wheels steady. Daniel thought about riding the train as a child, with his father, somewhere south, heading to the coast. His father had been young then, laughed easily. They played cards all night, a simple game, and his father let him win while pretending he didn't know he was doing it. Daniel had known, but he'd pretended too. He put the memory away and looked out the window. Chapter 2. The Book. What are you reading? She didn't answer right away. First, she looked at him. That quick assessment you do with strangers on trains. Safe or not, talkative or quiet, will they leave you alone or not? He apparently passed. Then she looked at the book. Chekhov. A pause. 3rd time this year. Do you like it? No. She said it calmly, the way you say something obvious. But I always reread him when things are bad. I don't know why. Daniel thought about that. Maybe because in his stories, everyone's having a hard time. Makes you feel less alone. She looked at him differently, just a moment longer. I'm Natasha, she said. Daniel. They didn't shake hands, they were too far apart, and the moment wasn't quite that kind. Just names, and it turned out that was enough. Are you going far? She asked. End of the line. You? Probably the same. That word, probably. Daniel noticed it. In the last few months, he'd said it constantly too. I'll probably go. I'll probably stay. Things will probably be fine. Probably as a way of not committing, of leaving yourself an exit. Not, I'm going to Portland, or I'm going to Denver. Just, probably. Which meant the destination didn't really matter. What mattered was leaving. He knew that feeling. When you're in motion, it doesn't matter where. What matters is that you're not where you were. When lights flash past the window and you don't owe anyone an explanation of why you're going or what for. When the distance between you and where you came from grows with every minute. It doesn't fix anything, but for a while, it lets you breathe. Your bookmark is interesting, he said. She didn't seem embarrassed, just looked down at the book, at the small corner of a photograph sticking out between the pages. My daughter, she said. She's 5 here. I take it everywhere. Is she alive? Natasha said it quickly, the way you do when you're used to people assuming the wrong thing. She just lives with her father, has for 3 years. I see. You don't, she said, not unkindly, just correcting. But that's fine. It's hard to understand. Outside, a light flashed, a lone lamp at some crossing, and then darkness again. The rain had gotten heavier. Now the drops tapped against the glass loud enough to hear even over the wheels. Daniel reached into his backpack and took out a thermos. Tea? She looked at the thermos, then at him. Something in the question, its simplicity, the absence of any preamble, seemed to settle something. Yes, she said. The book was old, he could see that better now. Cover worn smooth, the spine slightly split, the pages with that faint yellow that comes from years of handling. Books Books like that belong to people who read because they need to, because the book does something to them. He thought, Chekhov, which means something about the unsaid, about people who live alongside each other and can't quite reach, about loneliness that doesn't go away even when someone is there, or something else. He hadn't read it in a long time. Between them, on the small folding table, 2 cups, his, hers. The tea had cooled long before they finished it. They just sat there, like witnesses to the conversation. Natasha looked at the cups, then said, "It's strange how sometimes it's easier with a stranger than with the people you know. I used to think about this. I read somewhere that it has a name. The train stranger. The person you'll never see again. So you can." "So you can," Daniel repeated. Chapter 3. Tea and the first real words. The tea was strong. He always made it strong, a habit from years ago. The kind where the spoon practically stands on its own. Natasha took the cup in both hands. The way you hold something when you want warmth, and not just a drink. She sipped slowly, holding it with both hands, and that gesture, warmth coming through glass, was so familiar to watch that Daniel felt something close to relief. Just 2 people drinking tea on a night train. Everything else? Later. She looked out the window. The train moved steadily, the darkness outside dense, broken only sometimes by the lights of a town or a signal at a crossing or an oncoming train that roared past and vanished. "Where are you really going?" she asked. "To see my father." Daniel paused. "He's sick. I haven't seen him in 2 years." "Why not?" "We had a falling out." Another pause. "Over nothing, the way these things go. Over my choices. Wrong job, wrong woman, wrong life. His opinion." "And yours?" "Mine too, but differently." Natasha smiled slightly, not with amusement, in recognition. "Why now?" she asked. Daniel thought about it. He could say fear. He could say guilt, but both words felt slightly off. "Because he called," he said slowly, picking his way through it, which meant he made the first move, that it mattered more to him to make it right than to be right. A pause. I felt ashamed I'd waited so long. "He called, first time in 2 years, said, 'Come.' Didn't explain why, just, 'Come.' And you came. And I came." The wheels turned, the rain fell. The compartment was warm. It had held the heat of the day and hadn't let it go yet. It smelled of seat cushions and something sweet from a meal eaten earlier by someone else. And underneath that, the particular smell of train cars that never quite changes. That particular blend of dust and warmth and distance. "And you?" Daniel asked. Natasha looked into her cup for a long time. "I'm going because I don't know where else to go," she said, simply, without drama, the way you describe the weather. "I quit my job 3 weeks ago. I'm leaving the apartment. Everything there is his. I'm not going back. A friend invited me to come stay with her. She lives far. I came." "How long have you known her?" 20 years, since school." A pause. "She's the only person who doesn't say, 'I told you so.' That's worth a lot." It's everything, she said. They were quiet. A good quiet. Not the kind you feel obligated to fill, but the kind that means something on its own. The train was carrying them both through the night and the rain, and in that movement there is something settling. That you're already going, that you're no longer where you were, that the distance between you and that place is growing by the minute. "Tell me about your daughter," Daniel said. Natasha looked at him, surprised but not suspicious. "Why?" "I just want to listen, if you want to talk." She was quiet for a moment, then she began. The tea warmed from the inside, slowly, gradually, the way real things warm you. Not all at once, not brightly, just a little warmer. Outside, a crossing flashed past, red lights blinking, the gate down, a car waiting. Then it was all gone. The train moved through. And again darkness, again rain, again just the wheels. Daniel thought about the fact that he'd been on the train for 3 hours now, and that for the first time in those 3 hours, he felt calm. Not good, not bad, just calm. He poured what was left of the tea, just a little, enough for 2 sips each, divided it evenly. She took her cup. They drank in silence. Outside, something glinted, a small lake or pond that caught the sky for a moment. A second, then gone. Daniel wasn't sure he'd really seen it. Maybe he'd imagined it. Chapter 4. Night. Her name was Clara. Natasha talked about her the way mothers talk about children they haven't seen in a while, with that particular mix of precision and tenderness that comes from knowing someone very well, but seeing them rarely. Every detail seemed to stand on its own. Clara likes being read to, but only slowly. Clara is afraid of the vacuum cleaner, but tries to hide it. Clara once told her mother, "You get sad when you think I'm not looking, but I'm always looking." 8 years old, serious, loves horses, and can't stand oatmeal. She taught herself to read at 4, figured it out from labels in grocery stores. She rarely laughs, but when she does, the whole room goes with her. Natasha talked, carefully at first, then more freely, the way people do when they haven't been able to talk about what matters, and suddenly they can. Daniel listened, really listened, not waiting for a pause to say his own thing. Just listened. "Do you see her often?" he asked. "Every other weekend." Natasha's voice was steady, but you could feel the effort behind that steadiness, the kind you hold for a long time and get used to holding. "By the court agreement, sometimes more if my ex allows it." "Your ex?" "My ex-husband. He's a decent person, a good father." A pause. "That makes it harder, actually. It would be simpler if he were terrible." Daniel understood what she meant. When there's a clear villain, things are easier. When there's no one to blame, or when you're both to blame, that's the hardest. "I'm not a bad mother," Natasha said suddenly, in the middle of something else she'd been saying. She said it to the air, not to him, like she was talking to someone invisible who had been sitting inside her for a long time, always doubting. "I want you to know that. I didn't think you were." Everyone thinks so. When a child lives with the father, everyone assumes the mother did something wrong. "Who's everyone?" She was quiet. "Me, mostly," she said. Daniel said nothing. He just poured her the last bit of tea. Outside, the night had grown denser. They were several hours from the city now, and the darkness beyond the window was real country dark, without the orange glow that never quite leaves cities. Just rain, just the lights of oncoming trains occasionally. "Tell me about your father," Natasha said. And Daniel did. About how close they'd been when he was small. About his father teaching him to fix a bicycle, patiently, unhurriedly, explaining every step. About how something drifted apart later, gradually, almost invisibly, the way riverbanks separate when something blocks the flow upstream. About the work his father thought was beneath him. About the woman his father never accepted, simply because she wasn't from their town. About the last conversation 2 years ago, on the phone, both of them saying too much. "I hung up," Daniel said. "And then I spent 2 years waiting for him to call first. And he called. He called. What do you feel?" "I don't know yet." He looked at his cup. "Probably fear. That I'll get there and it'll be too late. Or that it won't be too late, but we still won't be able to talk. To talk. Just talk. Like people." Natasha looked at him for a long moment. "You know what I figured out," she said slowly, "in these 3 years while Clara has been with her father? That I spend an enormous amount of time explaining to myself how it happened, and almost no time just calling her, hearing her voice, asking about the cat." Daniel was quiet. "The explaining takes up all the space," Natasha continued, "and there's no room left for what actually matters." Outside, something flashed. A small station, a few lamps, an empty platform, and was gone. The train didn't stop. It kept going into the dark. For a long stretch, there were no lights at all, just rain and darkness. Uniform, monotonous, almost lulling. Occasionally, an oncoming train roared through. Noise, a strip of lit windows, then darkness again. Another world, glimpsed for a second and gone. Daniel thought about the fact that they'd been on the train for hours, and he didn't know her last name, didn't know what city she'd come from, knew almost nothing except what she'd told him, and yet he knew something important, that she was telling him the truth, that she was in pain, that she was headed somewhere good. Sometimes that's enough. It was deep in the night now. In the other compartments, people had long since gone to sleep. In theirs, only the nightlight burned, dim orange, and the wheels turned and the rain fell. Natasha went quiet for a moment. Then, "You know what my mother says? That everything happened because I'm too independent. That I should have given in more, agreed more, kept the family together." A pause. "Maybe she's right. I don't know." "What do you think?" "I think that my ex-husband and I were just different people who spent a long time pretending to be the same." She looked at her cup. "We got tired of pretending. It's not his fault or mine. It's just what happened." "That's honest," Daniel said. "Honest, but it doesn't make it easier." Later, when Natasha had gone quiet again, Daniel thought about what she'd said about the explaining, that it takes up all the space. He'd done the same. 2 years explaining the argument with his father to himself. Who was right? Who was wrong? Who should have made the first move? Replaying the words that had been said, finding new arguments, as though he could win a fight with the past if he just found the right words. You can't win a fight with the past. You can only make a phone call. Chapter 5. The middle of the night. There's a time on trains, around 2 or 3 in the morning, when the world outside seems to have stopped existing. The window shows absolute darkness, not a light, not a shape. The car sways steadily, evenly, and you feel as though you've fallen out of time. No yesterday, no tomorrow. Just this compartment, this light, this conversation. At that hour, people tell the truth, because the defences get tired of holding on. It was at that hour that Natasha said, quietly, looking at her cup, "I didn't cry at the hearing." Daniel didn't ask her to clarify. He just waited. When the judge awarded custody to my ex, everyone expected me to cry. My lawyer warned me it would help. Judges respond to that. But I couldn't. I sat there thinking about the fact that Clara would be fine with him. Objectively fine. His apartment is bigger. His mother lives nearby. The school district is better. And I couldn't cry. And after I cried for 3 days without getting up, she said it evenly. But that doesn't count. Daniel said nothing. People decided I was cold, Natasha continued. The people in the room, my lawyer, my ex. He said afterward that it was very telling. A pause. My mother thinks so too. She doesn't say it, but she thinks it. What do you think? I think I was scared. She said this like it was the first time she'd said it out loud. You could feel that, the way a word feels when it's been stuck somewhere for a long time and finally comes free. Not of the hearing, of fighting. I was scared that if I cried and demanded and pushed, it would become about me instead of about Clara, and I didn't know how to make it about her. She paused. People decided I was cold, that I didn't care. Another pause. I believe that myself sometimes, at night. That's not true, Daniel said. How do you know? Because people who don't care don't carry photographs in their books. He kept his voice low, and they don't reread Chekhov when things are hard. And they don't tell all of this to a stranger on a train at 2 in the morning. Natasha looked at him, the way you look at someone when you're deciding whether to believe them. Then she seemed to decide. Daniel thought about the fact that over the whole night they hadn't asked each other any of the usual things. Not what do you do, not where are you from, not have you ever been to. The conversation had gone straight to where it hurt, because the night and the dark and the sound of the wheels had taken it there themselves. Maybe that's how it should be. Maybe in daylight, among people, we talk about what's safe. And at night, with a stranger we'll never see again, we can finally say What's true?
This isn't proof, she said. Natasha, you're going to a friend who's the only person who doesn't say, I told you so. You're going because you're hurting and you need someone who will simply be there. That's not coldness. That's a person who understands what she needs. That takes something. She was quiet for a long time. Outside, the rain fell. The wheels turned. You need to call your father, she said at last, before you get there. Why? Because the explaining takes up all the space, she said, echoing herself. If you arrive with 2 years of explanations in your head, there'll be no room for him. Call. Just say you're on your way, that you're glad he called. Daniel looked at her. And you call Clara in the morning, he said, without explaining anything, not telling her how you're doing, just, how's the cat? What's going on at school? What's interesting? She'll ask why I'm calling. Tell her you wanted to hear her voice. That's true. Then tell her the truth. Natasha looked at him, the way you look when something important has landed and you need a moment with it. She looked down, then nodded. Sometimes you need to get off at the right stop, Daniel said slowly, like he was understanding it right now, in this moment. Even if your ticket goes all the way to the end. Natasha raised her eyes. What does that mean? Not exactly sure, but something like, sometimes the right place is where you are, not where you thought you were going. They were quiet for a long time. The train moved them through the night. At some point, Natasha closed her eyes. Not sleeping, just closed them. Daniel looked out the window, at the dark, at the occasional distant light, at the rain that kept falling. He took out his phone, found his father's number, typed 3 words. Dad, I'm coming. Sent it, put the phone away. Outside, darkness. The wheels turned, the rain fell. A small station slid past. No stop, just past. A few lamps, a dark station building, a bench on the platform where no one was sitting. Stations like this appear in the middle of the night, present, but empty. Like there's life in them, but it's sleeping right now. Daniel watched the station until it disappeared around a curve. He thought, someone always gets off here. Someone waits for this train, stands on this platform. For someone, this station is a beginning or an end. Not for him. He's going further. You always pass other people's stations. In the compartment, a particular silence settled, the kind that comes between people after something important has been said, and both of them need to sit with it. Not awkward silence, living silence, like a rest in music. Daniel looked out the window. Natasha looked out the window. The train moved. Chapter 6. Before dawn. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, the conversation grew quieter, because everything important had been said. Now, they could just be there. Daniel thought about how in the morning, soon now, he would arrive at his father's, walk into an apartment he hadn't seen in 2 years. The smell would be familiar from childhood,
Old books, medicine, something cooking. His father would open the door, older probably. 2 years is enough time for that. He wasn't afraid of it anymore. Natasha had fallen asleep, gradually, quietly, the way you fall asleep when you've been holding on for a long time and finally let go. The book had slipped from her lap, her head tilted slightly toward the wall. She was breathing evenly. Daniel didn't move so as not to wake her. The book had fallen. He picked it up from the floor, set it beside her. The photograph of Clara had shifted into view a little more. A small face, 5 years old, looking slightly to the side of the camera, serious. He looked at the photograph. Natasha had mentioned that Clara rarely looks straight at the camera, always slightly to the side, as though she sees something interesting somewhere others aren't looking. A good quality, Daniel thought, looking where others don't. He thought about his father, about the last phone call 2 years ago, about the voice, not angry, just tired. Back then, Daniel had only heard the words, had answered the words, but the voice had been something else. Quiet, rough, older than he remembered. His phone buzzed, a message from his father. Waiting. One word. Daniel looked at that word for a long time, then put the phone away and looked out the window. The darkness outside had begun to change, not light yet, but no longer absolute. A grey strip had appeared at the horizon, barely there. That hour was beginning when the night hasn't quite gone, but has started to pull back, and everything outside looks like an etching. Dark, high contrast, no middle tones. The rain had gotten quieter. Natasha woke on her own, opened her eyes, spent a few seconds not knowing where she was, then remembered. Picked up the book, looked at the photograph. She took out her phone, looked at it, put it back. Too early to call. But the gesture, taking it out, Daniel noticed. The gesture of someone who's already made the decision. She'll be glad you called, he said. She's always glad. Natasha said this quietly, like something she's known for a long time and sometimes forgets. I talk myself into thinking I'll be interrupting her, that the timing is wrong, that she's busy, but she's always glad. Then call more often. I will, she said, simply and directly, no qualifications. What time is it? Almost 5. How much longer? About 2 hours. She nodded, straightened up, tucked the loose strands of hair back. Did you write to your father? I wrote. He wrote back, waiting. Natasha nodded slowly. Good. Will you call Clara? When I get to my friend's place, I don't want to wake her at 5 in the morning. A small pause. But I'll call. I definitely will. Outside the window, fields were becoming visible, grey in morning fog, with scattered trees. The rain had nearly stopped. The sky to the east was growing lighter, not pink yet, just less dark. You know what's strange? Natasha said. I told you things I haven't told anyone, not even Sophie. About the hearing, about not crying. I tell her everything's fine. Why? Because she worries. Natasha looked out the window. But I can tell you, because you don't worry about me. You just listen. Is that good or bad? Good,
She paused. Sometimes you need someone who just listens, without the worry and without the advice. Daniel thought about his father, who had always offered advice, always worried, and precisely because of that had been hard to talk to. The worry took up all the space. I'm going to tell my father I'm glad to hear his voice, Daniel said. Just that, without explanations.
Yes, said Natasha. Exactly that. The train slowed, just slightly, almost imperceptibly. Ahead, in the fog, lights were beginning to show. Natasha picked up the book. Didn't open it, just held it. Her fingers moved along the spine, the way fingers do with familiar objects when your mind is somewhere else. Clara asked me something once, she said suddenly. Whether you can miss someone who's right there. She asked it about my mother. My mother visits them a lot. She said, I miss Grandma even when she's here, because when she's here, there's always somewhere to be, always something happening. And when she leaves, I want her to come back. Natasha stopped. She's a smart girl, Daniel said. Yes. The pause. I miss Clara when we're together too, because every time I think, almost time to leave, time is almost up, it's almost gone. Outside, the sky to the east was lightening slowly, first barely at all, then more noticeably. The grey was leaving, a pale pinkish tone appearing at the horizon. Not dawn yet, just the feeling of dawn about to come. The quietest hour. The birds outside were still silent. Chapter 7. The station. The station appeared out of the fog gradually. First the signal lights, red and green. Then the station building. Then the platform with a few figures on it. Early morning. 5 or 6 people waiting, collars up, watching the approaching train. Daniel looked out the window and thought that one of those shapes could be Sophie, the friend who had simply said, "Come," and was waiting. The train was slowing, the wheels changing their rhythm, and that changing rhythm said, "The night is ending." This was her stop. Natasha stood, picked up her bag, just the one bag, which meant she'd left in a hurry, hadn't planned to be away long. Put on her jacket. "This is your stop?" Daniel asked. "Yes." He stood too. They faced each other in the compartment, the small one with its worn cushions and 2 empty teacups, and outside the window, the platform was slowly moving past. "Thank you for the tea," she said. "Thank you for Chekhov." She almost smiled. "You know," Natasha said, "I thought I was going nowhere, that I was just running." She was looking at the platform. "But it turns out I'm going to Sophie, to someone who's waiting. That's completely different. That's completely different." The train stopped. Natasha picked up her bag, then picked up the book, took out the photograph of Clara, looked at it for a second, and put it not in the book, but in her pocket. Closer. "Call your father," she said from the doorway, by voice, not a message. "I will. Today. Today." She went into the corridor. He heard her footsteps, then the thud of the vestibule door.
Daniel sat down. Through the window he saw her, walking quickly along the platform, bag on her shoulder, not looking back.
The fog was low, and in that fog she was sharp and distinct, the way people look when they know where they're going. At the platform exit, she turned around. He raised his hand. She raised hers too, quickly, barely visible. Then the fog. The train began to move. The platform drifted backward. The lamps, the station building, the few figures of those meeting someone, all of it disappeared around the curve. Then fields again, then fog, then the morning light that was getting brighter by the minute. Daniel sat alone in the compartment. On the table, 2 cups, his and hers, both empty. The Chekhov book lay where Natasha had left it. He picked it up, opened it to a random page, read a paragraph. Chekhov wrote about 2 people sitting beside each other, each thinking their own thoughts, and it was good between them. Daniel closed the book, left it on the table, let it stay. He picked up his phone, found his father's number, didn't type, pressed call. It rang for a long time. Then, Daniel? His father's voice, quiet, rough, clearly awake already. Dad, I'll be there in 3 hours. A long silence, long enough that Daniel thought the call had dropped. Good son, his father said. His voice was rough and quiet. Outside the window, fields drifted past in the morning fog. Grey, still, the grass wet from the night's rain. The sky to the east was pink now, almost orange, and that light lay across everything outside, evenly and quietly. Daniel held the phone and listened to his father's breathing. Steady, slightly laboured. They weren't talking, just holding the line. 2 minutes, maybe 3. He didn't count. Then his father said, I'll make oatmeal. His voice wavered slightly on the last word. Just barely. Just a little. But Daniel heard it. Make it, Dad. His father hung up. Daniel put the phone away, closed his eyes for a second. They hadn't said anything, just both held the line. And that silence had been full, like the quiet in the compartment at night, like the sound of the wheels, like the rain that had finally stopped. 30 minutes to the end of the line. Daniel watched as the first signs of a large city began appearing outside. More lights, buildings closer together, a wider road running alongside the tracks. The train didn't slow, but something in its movement had changed, as though it too knew the destination was near. He thought about what had happened over the course of the night. Not outside. Nothing had happened outside. 2 people on a train, drinking tea, talking. That was all. But inside, something had shifted. Something that had been standing still for a very long time. He would call his father again when he got to the station. Just say, I'm here. I'm getting off. No explanations needed. No words to build toward that conversation that hadn't worked for 2 years. Just be there. Natasha was at Sophie's by now, probably, drinking tea in someone else's kitchen, talking. or quiet, that would be fine too. And tomorrow she would call Clara. He believed this, completely, without doubt. The train slowed. The end of the line was beginning. Daniel stood at the window. Morning fog lay low over the fields, white, thick, the kind that only comes in early fall when the nights are cold and the ground hasn't cooled all the way yet. Trees stuck up out of it, just the tops like islands. Everything else was white and still and without borders. Beautiful, he thought, just beautiful. He hadn't thought about something being beautiful in a long time. Not because there hadn't been beautiful things, he just hadn't been looking. The train was slowing down. You could feel it physically, something large and unstoppable finally deciding to stop. The wheels changing their rhythm, the car swaying differently. Almost there. And that's the story. Compartment 6. If it stayed with you, leave a like. It matters to me to know you're there. And if you haven't subscribed yet, there are more nights like this one ahead. Until next time, hey, get comfortable. Tonight's story is told through one woman's eyes. One night, one bag, one train. Tell me in the comments what city you're in right now. I read every one. Let's go. Compartment 6, through Natasha's eyes, the other side of the window. A story of one night. Before the train. Evening. She took only one bag. She was standing in the middle of the room, already dressed, already in her jacket, looking at the things. His things. Her things, which over 3 years had simply become things. The mug on the windowsill. Whose was it? His or hers? The blanket on the couch. She'd brought it back from a trip somewhere, but by now it had become shared, neutral, belonging to neither of them. The books on the shelf stood in a row, and she couldn't remember which ones she'd actually read and which ones had just been there for show, because this was the kind of apartment where people who had time to read were supposed to live. She didn't try to sort it out. She took a bag, hers, definitely hers, the small one she used to take when she visited Sophie back in college, and left. Before she pulled the door closed, she stopped for a second in the doorway, just stood there and looked at the apartment. 3 years is a long time. 3 years you come back to this place and call it home. 3 years you know which light switch sticks, that the bathroom tap needs to be turned all the way or it drips, that something always accumulates in the back left corner under the couch. You clean it, it comes back, you clean it again. 3 years of habits, 3 years of roots, 3 years of a smell you stop noticing and only notice when you leave. Right now, leaving, she could smell it. Something warm and faintly dusty, a little his, a little hers, a little shared. The kind of thing that wouldn't be shared anymore. She closed the door. Didn't slam it, just closed it. Quietly, carefully, the way you close something you don't want to wake. In the hallway it smelled like someone's dinner, and the particular damp warmth of radiators that had been turned on for the first time that week. Fall always came to her through that smell, not through the leaves, not through the cold,
but through the radiators. First you catch that metal, slightly dusty, domestic smell, and you understand that summer is over. This fall she'd smelled it before she'd understood that she needed to leave. She didn't think about the train until she was standing at the ticket window. She'd just walked toward the lights, toward movement, toward somewhere you could leave from. Her feet brought her there because her feet remembered the way, and her head had been making decisions poorly for several weeks now. Let the feet handle it. They still seem to know where to go. Next train north? She asked the clerk. North was where Sophie lived.
Sophie had invited her 2 weeks ago, simply without explanation, because they'd known each other for 20 years and explanations weren't needed. Come, Sophie had written. I'm here. 40 minutes. Lower berths available in cars 3 and 6. 6, she said. Not because 6 was better than 3, just 6. The ticket was warm, just printed. She put it in her jacket pocket and walked to the platform. Outside it was raining, light, sideways, almost invisible in the lamplight. The kind of rain that doesn't soak you right away, but accumulates, first on your shoulders, then in your hair, then somewhere inside, behind the sternum, where everything gathers that is nowhere else to go. She didn't open an umbrella, just walked in the car, first minutes. The compartment was almost dark. The nightlight was on, orange, dim, as though it was embarrassed to be brighter. That kind of light doesn't illuminate, it just suggests. There's a table, there's a berth, there's a window, and outside the window, the platform is still visible, with people saying goodbye under the lamps. She came in, set her bag down, took off her shoes, the instinctive first move in a train compartment, before you even sit down, pulled her feet up under her. In her hands, she had a book. She didn't remember taking it, probably from the shelf, automatically, while she was packing. Chekhov, the 3rd time this year. She always read Chekhov when things were going wrong. Not because he consoled her, more because in his stories everyone was more or less the same way, and that made her feel slightly less alone. Between the pages there was a photograph. She opened the book to a random page. The lady with the dog. She'd read it so many times she knew it by heart. Not on purpose, it just settled there. When you read something often enough, it sinks in the way dust sinks into things that sit on a shelf for a long time. Anna Gurov, the white dog. A story about 2 people who thought it was temporary, and it turned out to be their whole lives. And they didn't know what to do with it, because their lives had no room for it. Everything was already occupied. Other lives, other people, other obligations. She closed the book, looked at the cover. Chekhov wrote about people who couldn't say what they felt, who felt something enormous and quiet and important, and said nothing, or talked about something else, or left, or stayed, but silently, with this enormous thing inside them, like a suitcase in a small room. Nowhere to put it. Can't carry it out. You learn to live around it. Maybe that was why she read him. Not because he consoled. He didn't. Chekhov never consoled anyone. just because she recognized herself. Oh, so it's not only me. So this happens. It has happened for a long time. To many people. She held the photograph by its edges. Clara, 5 years old in this picture, sitting on a swing in a white dress, looking straight into the camera, the sun full in her face, but she isn't squinting, isn't turning away, just looking straight ahead. She never turned away from difficult things. That was probably from her, that quality. Or from him. They'd never figured out what came from whom. Natasha ran her finger along the edge of the photograph. Then she closed the book. Not because she didn't want to read, just looked out the window. On the platform, a woman was saying goodbye to someone, holding his hands, talking, not letting go. He'd already half turned toward the train, but was still standing there, still letting himself be held. Natasha looked at those hands and thought, this is the moment. This is the moment when you can still not let go. After, you can't. After, there is the train, and the platform pulls away, and all that's left is to stand and watch. She knew that feeling well, standing and watching. The train pulled forward, once, twice, moved. The platform began to drift slowly backward. People with raised hands, lamps that stretched and broke. The woman with empty hands now. She'd let go and was standing, watching. And in her expression, there was something so level, so already accepted, that Natasha looked away. Because she recognized it, that face. She'd seen it in mirrors, often. Her compartment companion, the one who was 4 minutes late. He came in after the train was already moving. She felt the air move. The compartment door opened and looked over. A man, around 40, maybe a little older, with a backpack, carrying it awkwardly. He bumped his shoulder on the doorframe, not because the backpack was too big, but because he wasn't watching where he was going. He was looking into the compartment, sizing up the situation, reading the space. She knew that look. You walk into somewhere that's already occupied, and in a second you assess, safe or not. Will they talk or leave you alone? Will there need to be interaction, or can you just be quiet? She looked too, quickly, out of habit, tired. Not from this particular evening, from something longer. He was dressed neatly, but without attention to himself. The coat was good, the shirt was good, but something about him said he dressed in the dark, or while thinking about something else. No tie, and from the way his collar was open, it was clear the tie had come off a long time ago, with relief. Or he hadn't worn one today at all, or had decided never to wear one again. She knew how to read people. It had been her professional skill for years, and then it became just a skill. 22 years she'd been reading people by small things, the way they enter a room, the way they hold their hands, what they say and what they don't say. This person, she could feel, was carrying something heavy. Not the backpack. The backpack looked light. Something else. The kind you carry inside and that doesn't show from the outside, but can be sensed. The way you sense another person's presence in the dark. You can't see them, but you know. She wasn't curious about other people's weights. She had enough of her own. She just noticed and turned back to the window. "Good evening," he said. "Evening," she answered, and turned back to the window. Not rude, just enough. She wasn't in the mood for conversation. Not for conversation, not for eye contact, not for someone sitting nearby, creating the need for presence. 3 weeks she'd lived inside that. The obligation of presence, the necessity of words, having to answer and respond and explain again. And now she needed to just ride. In the dark, in quiet. No one. He sat down, took out his phone, looked at it. And from the way he looked, it was clear he was reading, but not seeing. That something was there, but he wasn't ready to face it. Put the phone away, took out his earbuds, put them in, didn't turn anything on. That she knew too, earphones as armor. You wear them and the world thinks you're occupied, but you're just sitting in silence with the appearance of purpose. Outside it was raining. Drops ran diagonally across the glass, fast, merging, disappearing. She watched them and thought about nothing in particular. Just rain. Just glass. Just the darkness beyond it, occasionally lit by a signal light at a crossing, then dark again. The train picked up speed. The sound of the wheels evening out, becoming steady, like the breathing of someone who has finally stopped hurrying. She opened the book, read 1 page, didn't remember any of it, closed it. He was looking at the book. "What are you reading?" She looked at him, weighed it. Something in the question wasn't intrusive. He'd asked the way you ask something genuine, without preamble, without performance. Just, what? Chekhov. A pause. 3rd time this year. Do you like it? No. She said this easily, the way you state something obvious. But I always reread him when I'm having a hard time. I don't know why. He was quiet for a second, not filling the silence, not rushing. Then he said, "Maybe because in his stories everyone is having a hard time. It makes you less alone." She looked at him differently, a little longer. "I'm Natasha," she said. "Daniel." They didn't shake hands, just names. And that turned out to be enough. The 1st hour. The thermos. She took the tea, even though she hadn't planned to. He took out the thermos, so simply, so without ceremony, just took it out and asked. That she didn't have time to say no, or didn't want to. Sometimes someone else's simplicity opens something you've kept closed for a long time. He didn't offer. He assumed she'd want some, and he was right, though she hadn't known it herself. The tea was strong, too strong, bitter almost, but the warmth from it came immediately, through her hands, through her palms, up through her arms. She wrapped both hands around the cup and didn't drink, just held it. Outside the rain tapped against the glass. The compartment rocked gently as the train moved, barely perceptibly, like a cradle. "Where are you really going?" she asked. It was a strange question, really. She wasn't sure herself why she'd said it that way. Maybe because everything about him, The exhaustion, the backpack with a book spine sticking out of the top, the shirt with the open collar, spoke of a really. He wasn't just going somewhere. To see my father, he said. He's sick. I haven't been in 2 years. Why not? We had a falling out. Over nothing, the way these things go. Over my choices. Wrong job. Wrong woman. Wrong life. In his opinion. And in yours? In mine, also wrong, but differently. She almost smiled, not with amusement, in recognition. That differently she understood. When you know yourself that something isn't right, and when someone tells you, those are two different kinds of knowing. The first is quiet, your own. You can live with it. The second is loud and comes from outside and makes you want to go into a different room or a different city. Why now? She asked. Because he called, said, come. Didn't explain why, just come. A pause. That means it matters more to him to make it right than to be right. I felt ashamed that I'd waited so long. Natasha looked down at her cup. Warm, strong. Something was reflected in it. The nightlight, the edge of the window, the vague shape of her own hands. And you? He asked. She didn't answer right away. Looked into the cup for a long time. I'm going because I don't know where else to go, she said, simply, without drama. The way you talk about the weather. I left my job 3 weeks ago. I'm leaving the apartment. Everything there is his. I won't go back. My friend invited me, so I came. That was all of it, in exactly that order, with exactly that many words. Nothing more was needed. He nodded, not sympathetically, not with alarm, just nodded, the way you nod when you hear something real and don't want to spoil it. How long have you known her? 20 years, since school. That's good. It's everything, she said, and went quiet. Not because the conversation had ended, just because the pause was needed, the way air is needed. The compartment was warm, the rain was falling, the wheels were turning, and in all of that, there was something that made it possible to be quiet without awkwardness. To sit in silence next to a stranger and not feel that anything needed to be explained. Outside, the light flashed, solitary, at a crossing, disappeared. She took the photograph out of the book. Clara, 5 years old, the swing, white dress, sun in her face, not squinting, looking straight ahead. Natasha held the photograph between 2 fingers, carefully, the way you hold something that is simultaneously the most important thing in the world and the most painful. He noticed. The middle of the night, about Clara. My daughter, she said, before he could ask. She's 5 here. I carry this everywhere. She saw him prepare to ask the thing people usually ask when they see a photograph of a child carried by a mother traveling alone. She said it first. She's alive, calmly, without bitterness. She'd gotten used to saying it. She just lives with her father, has for 3 years. I see, he said. You don't, she said, not unkindly. But that's fine.
It's hard to understand. And that was true. Nobody understood. Even she didn't always understand how it had happened, though she knew every step, every word, every morning that had led to Clara living with her father and her. Here, on a night train, with one bag and a photograph between the pages of Chekhov. She put the photograph away, not in the book, in her pocket, closer. 3 years. 3 years she'd been saying to everyone, we agreed, it's better for her this way. She's happy there. And it was true. Clara was happy there. She had her school friends, her own swing in the backyard, a cat she'd named Cloud, and a father who worked from home and was always around. All of that was true. But every time it was time to bring her back, after weekends, after school breaks, Natasha would stop in front of the building and stand there for a minute, maybe 2. Just stood, looking at the door, then turned and walked to the subway. And every time something stayed there at that door, something small and warm and Clara's. She'd never told anyone this, not even Sophie. When did you last see her? He asked. 2 weeks ago. A pause. We went to the zoo. She only wanted to see the owls, not the elephants, not the giraffes, just the owls. She stood in front of the enclosure for 20 minutes and watched. I didn't rush her. The zoo had been almost empty that day, a weekday, early October, kids still in school. She and Clara had walked nearly alone down the paths already thick with fallen leaves. It smelled good, of autumn and animals and cooled air. Clara kept pulling her by the hand, first to the monkeys, then to the pelicans, then to that corner where the owls were kept, and stopped. She stood and watched, seriously, with concentration, the way adults look at something important. The owl on its branch looked back at her too, unblinking, with still yellow eyes. They looked at each other for several minutes, and Natasha stood beside her and thought, this is what it means to be here. Not talking, not explaining, just standing beside someone who is looking at something important. Then Clara said, they look like they know, and Natasha asked, know what? Clara thought, said, everything, just everything, but quietly. Then she took her hand and pulled her toward the exit. There was a cart selling hot chocolate near the gate that Clara had smelled from the moment they arrived. They drank it on a bench. Leaves were falling. Clara swung her feet and talked about school, about how they were learning the 9 times table, and it was harder than the 8s, but she almost had it. Natasha listened and thought, this is what matters. 9 times tables and hot chocolate and falling leaves. This is what matters. Not the things that keep you up at night. This. And immediately thought, almost time to go. Already, last hour. Smart bird, he said. She said, they look like they know. Natasha smiled, just slightly, at the corner. 8 years old, and she can already tell the difference between knowing and pretending to know. Outside the window, the forest started, dark, close, no space between the trees. They pressed right up to the track, and in the light from the train, they flashed past so fast they merged into a single wall. She watched that wall and thought, like that.
That's what it's like when something moves past quickly. When there's no time to see it properly, it flashes and it's already behind you, and you can't go back. Do you miss her? He asked. Such a simple question. So simple she couldn't find anything to put in front of it. Constantly, she said. Not sometimes. Not, of course, but things are fine. Constantly. And this was the first time in 3 years she had said that word out loud. That exact word, just like that. He didn't answer. Didn't say, "That's understandable," or "I can imagine." Just nodded, slowly, the way you nod when you hear something heavy and don't want to make it lighter without the right to do so. She was, unexpectedly, grateful for that. Somewhere between, about what ended. She thought about her ex-husband, though she hadn't wanted to. The thought just came, the way all thoughts come on trains, by themselves, without permission, out of the dark. They'd been together for 8 years. Good years. She didn't want to say bad, because that would have been untrue. Just different years. The first one's light and fast, with the feeling that everything was just beginning. Then Clara, and that was a different kind of happiness. Heavy, deep, full of fear and tenderness at the same time. Then Clara grew, and they both returned to themselves. And it turned out that in the meantime, they both become slightly different people. Not bad, just different. Like they'd been building something together and looked back and found they'd been working from different plans. The house was standing, but the rooms didn't quite line up. They didn't name it for a long time. They lived side by side, were polite, shared the table and the calendar, shared Clara on weekends. It was a perfectly respectable life. Millions of people live this way and call it normal. Maybe it was normal. She just couldn't call it happy. Then she said it out loud, simply said, "We need to talk." And he nodded, the way people nod who have been waiting for that conversation for a long time, and by then don't know who's going to start. They talked for a long time, without raised voices, almost entirely without raised voices. Strange that. 8 years, and at the end, no raised voices. Just tired and quiet. Coffee on the kitchen table that had gone cold long before. Clara asleep. Rain outside. They talked about what had been good and what hadn't fit, and what would happen next, and about Clara, especially about Clara. About Clara was the hardest. Not because they argued, they barely argued, just because this was the place where both of them felt they were doing something that would hurt. Not them, but her. And there was no way to make it not hurt, only to make it hurt less. They tried to make it hurt less, as much as they could. Clara stayed with him. That decision had taken the longest and hurt the most. But she understood the logic. She'd always worked long hours, stayed late often. He had a flexible schedule. He could pick Clara up from school and be around. It was the rational choice. She was a rational woman. Rational people make rational choices. And then they live with them. Live with them. Which means standing in front of the building on Sunday evenings and looking at the door.
which means a photograph between the pages of Chekhov, moved from book to pocket and back, which means constantly. You miss her constantly. Outside the train window, the forest went on, dense, dark, no clearings, the kind of forest you see in the middle of the night, in the middle of fall. She watched it and thought, good thing forests have no logic. They just stand, not because it's right or wrong, not because they're supposed to. They just stand, and that's enough. She'd like to learn how to do that. Just stand and have that be enough. Maybe someday. The second hour, 22 years.
The rain outside would strengthen, then nearly stop. The window had fogged up at the bottom. She ran her finger across the glass, and in the clearing that opened, she could see a field. Flat, black, without a single light. You said you quit your job, he said. By choice or... By choice. She lowered her hand from the glass, though by then it didn't make a difference. They'd stopped seeing me a long time ago. Me or what I did. Just a body in a seat. A function. How long were you there? 22 years. She said it and heard it herself. 22 years. That was nearly half her life. More than she'd lived before she started there. More than her marriage had lasted. More than Clara had been alive. She'd arrived young, at 33. By today's standards, that's not very young. But then it felt like it. She'd come with the sense that something real was beginning. That this, now, was for real. With responsibility and meaning and stakes. The first years she worked without noticing the time. Stayed late, read, studied, asked questions. They valued her, not loudly, not with bonuses, but quietly. Leave it for Natasha, she'll sort it out. Ask Natasha, she knows. That was good. It was the feeling of being needed, which you don't notice while you have it, and feel so clearly when you don't. Then things began to change, not all at once, gradually, the way the weather changes when you haven't gone outside. You don't notice until you step out and realize it's already a different season. New people arrived, younger, not better or worse, just different. They spoke a different language, thought in different categories, moved at a different pace. She tried to learn, not out of fear but out of genuine interest. But something in it didn't take. Not because it was too difficult, just the way it is when you learn a language in adulthood. You learn the vocabulary, you learn the grammar, but the accent stays. You can always tell you're not from there. The last 2 years she went there and felt like a guest. Courteous, experienced, occasionally useful, but a guest. In a place she'd called hers for 20 years. I arrived there at 33, she said. I don't remember myself younger than that job. I thought I was it, and it was me, that we were one thing. And it turned out the world changed, and I didn't. She said this without bitterness. I did everything the way I knew how. It's just that what I know how to do isn't needed anymore. Not in the form I know how to do it. Younger people do the same thing for 1/3 of the cost and 3 times faster, even if less carefully. Careful
isn't valued now. Fast is. He was quiet. You should feel sad about that, he said, or angry. 22 years is a lot. I'm sad, she agreed, but not angry. Angry at whom? At time. Time doesn't get angry back. A pause. What scares me is something else. What?
She looked out the window. In the fogged glass, there was her face, blurred like a photograph taken with a slow shutter. She thought, that's what I look like when no one's watching. That's my actual face. I was used to knowing who I am. She spoke slowly, as though feeling for words the way you feel for something in the dark. Every morning I would get dressed and go, and there was a place where I understood things, where it was clear why I'd gotten up. And now I wake up and don't know why. Not in the dark way, just, I don't know. She stopped. The train moved through the darkness, and she thought about how long it takes a person to understand who they are without work, without a role, without a place where they're known, without what had occupied the space for 22 years. Who are you without all of that? What's left? She didn't know the answer, but for the first time in 3 weeks, that not knowing didn't frighten her as much. Maybe because the dark outside was the same. Nothing was visible. It wasn't clear what was out there. But the train was moving, and somehow, that was fine. There are fields outside, probably, she said, or forest. Can't see. Most likely both, he said. Yes, exactly. She paused. Most likely both, but we can't see them because it's dark. They're still there. He looked at her. You mean answers? I mean, something is out there. Just dark right now. Outside, a village flashed by. Several lit windows, the dark outline of a church steeple, a dog at the roadside who looked at the train and looked away. I think about this, he said suddenly. I had it too, a place where things were clear. Work I'd done for years. Then I left. Not because it was bad, just because I understood I was holding on to it, because without it, I didn't know who I was. A pause. That's its own fear. Not losing the job, losing the answer to, who are you? Yes, she said. Exactly that. They were both quiet. The tea in her cup had gone cold. She noticed it only now. Picked it up, took a sip. Cold, slightly astringent, but still warm inside somehow, as though it had been holding the heat for her specifically. So what now? He asked, without pressure, just simply. I don't know, she said. This is the first time in 22 years I don't know what's coming. Even when I left my marriage, I knew. I had a plan. Now, nothing. A pause. I suppose that should be frightening, but sometimes it feels like something else. What? She thought. Interesting, she said. Very quietly interesting. He nodded, slowly, as though she'd said something precise, something he'd known somewhere, but hadn't found the word for before. Deeper into the night, about him.
The rain had stopped. It happened without her noticing. At some point she realized the sound of drops was gone, and only the sound of wheels remained. The forest outside had thinned, opening the sky. Dark, dense, no stars. The clouds hadn't cleared. The rain had just ended. She looked at him. He was sitting with his eyes closed, not sleeping. She could tell from the way his fingers moved slightly on his knee. Just in the dark behind closed eyes, where there's nothing you have to see, no one whose gaze you have to meet. She knew that feeling. Sometimes you want to be neither asleep nor awake, just to exist, without requirements. Then he opened his eyes, looked at her, evenly, without embarrassment at being watched. "Tell me about your father," she said. Not because she needed to say something, she just wanted to know. He was quiet. "He's someone who knows how things should be done," he said at last. "Not because he's cruel, just he has a map inside, the right path, the wrong path. He lives by it and genuinely wants you to also." A pause. "My father thought he loved me, and he did, just through the map, through you should and you must. And you wanted to be loved without the map. I wanted him to look at me, not at who I was supposed to be, but at who I actually was." His voice was even, without anger. Once I told him that directly. He was hurt. I left. 2 years of silence. "And there he called," she said. "And now he called," he repeated. Just said, "Come," and hung up. No apologies, no explanations. Just, "Come." He was looking out the window. I think for him that was the apology, the most he's capable of. She thought about her own father. They'd never really fought, just lived side by side and didn't know each other very well. Polite strangers with the same last name. Sometimes she thought, maybe that's worse than fighting. Fighting means something important existed between you. Polite silence from habit. That's something else. "Are you afraid to go?" she asked. A long pause. "Afraid it's too late," he said. Not in the sense of the illness, in the sense of that conversation that's needed, that there won't be the energy for it, his or mine, I don't know, that will be polite again. And politeness is just another way of not quite meeting. She was quiet. "What if you said something simple?" she said. "Not that conversation, just that you're glad to see him, that you're glad to hear his voice, that you came because you wanted to." He looked at her. "That seems too simple." "Simple is the hardest," she said. "Difficult conversations are actually easier. They have structure. There are accusations. There are defenses. But I'm glad to see you. That's open. No protection." Something in his face shifted, barely visible. The way something shifts when you hear a word you'd been looking for without knowing it. The train slowed, a small station. They both looked out the window. Empty platform, one lamp, a dog under a bench. Nobody got on. Nobody got off. The doors closed. The train moved on.
"Strange thing with a stranger," she said. "Sometimes it's easier than with the people who know you." "Because you can," he said. She recognized in that "can" what she herself had been thinking. That a stranger is someone you won't see again, someone you don't need to impress, someone who doesn't know who you are, who only knows you now, only in this dark, only while the train is running. "So you can," she agreed. After midnight, the silence between words. They stopped talking somewhere after midnight, not because the words ran out, just something had shifted and the silence became the same as conversation. She looked out the window. He looked out the window. The train moved in the dark, and occasionally an oncoming train would roar past in a flash, and then darkness again, and the steady sound. She thought about Clara, not anxiously, just thought about her. Clara was asleep by now, probably. She had a blue, moon-shaped nightlight they'd bought together, back when Clara was afraid of the dark. She stopped being afraid, but kept the light. "It's pretty, Mum." Right now, that moon was glowing in her room. Clara was sleeping. The cat, Cloud, was settled at her feet. Everything was fine. Everything was fine. Sometimes, everything is fine is the hardest thing. Because when everything is fine, there's no reason to call. No reason to show up at 11 at night. Just quiet. Just fine without you. "Will you call her tomorrow?" he asked suddenly, quietly, as though he'd read something. "Yes," she said. "When I get to Sophie's. I don't want to wake her at 5 in the morning. She'll be glad." "Yes." A pause. "She's always glad. Even when I call at a bad time, she's always glad. I'm sometimes amazed by it, how she knows how to do that. She never hears reproach in my call, even though I'm not reproaching her. She's just glad." He was quiet. "Some children have that," she said. "It's not something you teach them. It's just who they are. Clara has been open since the day she was born. She smiled at everyone. Strangers on the subway, checkout clerks, elderly women on benches. Everyone melted." "That's probably from you," he said. She pressed her lips together. "No," she said. "I know how to close off. She doesn't." And that too was true. She knew how to close off. She'd learned long ago, firmly, reliably. At work, always composed, always in form, no cracks. At home too. The last years of the marriage, she'd lived behind thick glass. You could see and hear through it, but you couldn't reach her. She'd thought this was good, that it was called restraint. Now she thought that maybe that glass had been the problem. Maybe. She hadn't figured it out yet. Maybe that was why she was going to Sophie, because Sophie would help her figure it out. Or wouldn't help her figure anything out, but would just be there, which sometimes matters more. Outside the window, the sky had begun to change, ever so slightly, just becoming a little less black. The very first, very quiet movement toward morning, when the night takes one last deep breath. She felt it in her body, didn't see it, felt it, the way you feel a station approaching on a train, not from an announcement, just something in the air has changed, in the speed, in the way the world outside becomes slightly more substantial. "Did you write to your father?" she asked. "I wrote." He wrote back, waiting. That word, waiting, she held in her mind. One word. He could have written, "Okay," or "I'll be glad," or "See you." He wrote, waiting, which meant already, for a long time already. 2 years of waiting and just not saying it. "Good," she said, and that was everything that needed to be said. The sky in the east had gone slightly grey at the horizon. Not pink yet, just the darkness there was a little less dark. The fields in this light were almost white. The fog had settled low and dense, and trees stuck out of it like islands. She looked at this and thought, there's the border, where the night ends and morning hasn't started yet. The fog above the fields, a few trees, and a sky that hasn't decided yet what it will be. Before dawn, about boredom and closeness. She dozed off, just briefly, at the very surface of sleep, where you still hear everything around you, the sound of the wheels, his breathing, even, quiet, the slight sway of the car on a curve. All of it was close, and all of it was far, like sounds behind glass. She woke from a silence, or rather, from the way the silence had changed. The train was still moving, but something inside had shifted. She opened her eyes. He wasn't sleeping either. He sat straight, looking out the window. In the pre-dawn light, his face was tired, but different. As though over the course of the night, something had come out that had been held inside for a long time. Not disappeared. Come out. Those are different things. "Clara once said something," Natasha said, just into the air, without explaining where it came from. "Can you miss someone who's right there?" She asked that about my mother. My mother visits them often. She said, "I miss Grandma even when she's here, because when she's here, we're always rushing somewhere. And when she leaves, I want her to come back." She stopped. He was quiet, listening. "I miss Clara when we're together too," she said. "Every time I think, soon I have to bring her back, almost time to leave, last hour. And I spend that time in the goodbye instead of just being there." She hadn't told anyone this, not even Sophie. She told Sophie everything's fine, because Sophie worried, and worry takes up space. But right now, to a stranger on a night train, she said what was actually true, because here she could, because he wasn't worried about her. He was just listening, and that was exactly what was needed. Sometimes you need someone who just listens, without anxiety, without advice, without "I told you so." "You're cooler today," he said. Not a question, a statement. "I will." A pause. "I'll tell her I was thinking about her, that I was on a train at night and thinking about her. Will she understand?" "She already understands," said Natasha. 8 years old. She already understands more than I think. She probably always did. The dawn was moving, slowly, unhurried, the way everything real arrives. The pink strip at the horizon grew wider, higher. The fog over the fields grew lighter. The trees came through more clearly. Now you could see the trunks, the branches, bark wept from the night. The birds were still quiet, but almost. Her stop. Getting off. The station appeared out of the fog slowly. First the signals, red and green lights by the tracks. Then the station building, small with an open door, light coming from inside. Then the platform, a few people with their collars up, meeting someone. She looked at them and scanned for Sophie, though Sophie didn't know which train she was on. Sophie had just said, "Come," and was waiting. The train was slowing. She stood up almost as soon as she felt the deceleration, picked up her bag, put on her jacket. All of it quickly, from memory. Her body knew how to get ready, even when her head wasn't quite following what was happening. "This is your stop?" he asked. "Yes." He stood too. They stood in the compartment, the small one with worn seats and 2 cups on the folding table. Outside, the platform was slowly moving past. She looked at the cups, both almost empty. The night was in them, in the last of the cold tea. "Thank you for the tea," she said. "Thank you for Chekhov," he said. She almost smiled, picked up the book, took out the photograph, Clara, the swing, the white dress, the sun full in her face. Looked at it for a second, put it not in the book, in her pocket. Closer. She left the book on the table. "Call your father," she said from the doorway. By voice, not a message. "I will. Today. Today." She stepped into the corridor, walked toward the exit, past closed compartment doors, past a window in which the dawn was already visible, pink and even. Pushed the door, stepped onto the platform. The air was cold and clean, completely different from the air inside the car. The car's air had been warm, enclosed, nocturnal. This air was open, with the smell of wet earth and something faintly smoky from somewhere far away. She breathed it in all the way down, so her ribs opened. The fog lay low over the platform. The people meeting someone stood in it, quiet, collars up, their faces still 2/3 asleep. No Sophie among them. Of course not. Sophie didn't know which train. She walked toward the platform exit, walked fast, bag on her shoulder, and thought, "I'll call now. Not Sophie. Clara. Of course it's early. Of course it's 5 in the morning. Of course she might be sleeping. But sometimes it matters to call right now. Because right now there are words that later will go the way morning fog goes, slowly and without you noticing." At the platform exit, she stopped, turned around. The train was still there. In the window of the compartment, his window, there was a silhouette. He was watching. She raised her hand, quickly, barely. He raised his too, quickly. Then the fog between them. She turned and walked. Deep night, while he slept. Somewhere after 2, she didn't look at the time, just felt it. He dozed off. He was sitting by the window, his head drooped slightly to one side, his breathing steadied. Not deep sleep, the light surface kind you get on trains, when the body switches off and something inside still hears. She knew it. She used to sleep like that on trains when she was young, riding to see Sophie during breaks. You can surface in a second, but for now, quiet. For now, rest. She didn't sleep. She looked out the window, at the darkness, which was complete. No lights, no hint of what was behind it. Fields, maybe. Forest. Maybe a river you couldn't see but could guess from the low-lying fog. All of it was out there. She knew. She just couldn't see it. She thought about what he'd said about his father. He called, and so he was going. One call after 2 years, and that was enough. Enough to pack a bag in an hour. Enough to get on a night train. Enough to go. She thought, how many times had she waited for someone to call like that? Just call. Just say, come, without explaining why, trusting that she'd come. And she would. She would always come if someone called exactly like that, with exactly that voice, with exactly that come, without conditions. But no one particularly called like that. Or they called and she didn't hear. Or she heard but thought, not now, I'm busy, no time, later. Later. A word that lives in the future and never becomes the present. Outside something glinted. Water. A river or a lake. For a second it opened in the darkness as a silver stripe, and then closed again. Night water. She watched the place where the silver had been after it was gone. Just watched. Interesting, she thought, how the memory of a place works. That lake exists constantly, in the daytime, at night, when there's no train and when there is. It simply is. It doesn't wait to be noticed. It just reflects whatever is above it. Stars at night, if there are any, and if not, just dark sky. And that's also fine. Reflect what's there, not what you wish were there. She took the photograph from her pocket. In the dim light of the compartment, you could barely see it. Just a small rectangle in her hand, a blurred shape. But she knew what was there. Clara, the swing, the white dress, the sun in her face. She held the photograph and thought, when was the last time I was really with her? Not counting the time, not thinking about leaving. Just there. The zoo, the owls, 20 minutes at the enclosure. That was probably really there. She'd stood beside her and not hurried her, hadn't thought about the time, hadn't felt it passing, just watched Clara watch the owls and thought, beautiful, just beautiful. Need to do that more. It seemed so simple, just more often. But she knew that simple was the hardest, that it's easier to know what's right than to do what's right, that it's easier to say, I should do it more, and not do it, than to do it, quietly, without announcements, without internal speeches about being a good person. Just do it. She put the photograph back in her pocket. Next weekend, wherever Clara wanted to go. She wouldn't suggest anything. She'd ask, where do you want to go? And wherever she said, there. The train rocked. Daniel breathed steadily. The nightlight glowed. The sound of the wheels had become so familiar it was no longer heard. It had become part of the silence, its texture. She closed her eyes, not to sleep, just because. Sometimes you want to close your eyes and stay in a darkness you chose yourself, not the darkness outside that you don't control. This one, your own, warm, with the reddish glow of the nightlight through your eyelids. In that darkness, she thought about tomorrow, not anxiously, just thought. Here, Sophie. Sophie will open the door, will say something simple, warm, Sophie-ish. Will produce a blanket, will put the kettle on or warm up soup. Something concrete, material, real. That's good when it's concrete, when you can touch it. Then they'll talk, probably. Or not right away. First, they'll just be near each other, the way old friends can. Sophie won't rush her. She never rushed. Then, Clara. First a message, then call by voice, because Daniel was right. By voice is different. Clara will hear not the words, but her. That matters more than words. Then, something else. Some next thing she can't see yet because it's dark. But it's there. Out there, past the dark, something is there. Most likely, both. A small station. The lamp and 3 people. The train slowed. A small station, nearly 3 a.m. She opened her eyes. Daniel woke too, the kind of person who feels a change in rhythm even in sleep. They both looked out the window. The platform was dark, only one lamp burning at the entrance to the station building. Under it stood 3 people, a woman, a man, and between them a boy of about 7. The boy was asleep, standing, leaning against his mother, hands in his pockets. The mother held his shoulder with one hand. Automatically, the way you hold something you have to hold, even when you're tired. The man looked at the approaching train and said something. She couldn't hear what, but from the way he moved his lips, he was counting cars, or looking for the right one. They got on the next car. The doors closed. The train moved. The empty platform drifted away. The lamp, the building, the darkness. The boy was asleep standing up, she said. I saw, said Daniel. She was holding his shoulder. Yes. They said nothing more about it, but both of them, she could feel, kept thinking about it for a while, about how easy it is to hold a sleeping child, about that particular thing, holding someone who has trusted you so completely that they sleep standing up, who doesn't think about falling, because they know they won't fall, because there's a hand nearby. Her mother had held her like that on trains. She suddenly remembered. She was maybe 6. They were going somewhere. She couldn't remember where. She only remembered the smell of her mother, something warm, slightly sweet, with a trace of the perfume she wore then, and the feeling of the shoulder beside her, solid, reliable, the kind you can lean against and not think. When was the last time she'd felt that she could lean on something and not think? A long time ago. A very long time ago. Maybe that was why she was going to Sophie. Not for advice, not for conversation. For that feeling of a shoulder nearby that says, you can. You don't have to hold everything right now. I'm here. Do you notice people on platforms? She asked. Always, he said.
On trains you always notice, because they're a moment. You pass, and that's it. You won't see them again. It makes them distinct, alive, each one with a story you'll never know. That boy, she said, he'll grow up. He'll have his own life. He probably won't remember this platform at 3 a.m, but somewhere inside, it will stay. The body remembers that there was a shoulder nearby, that it was safe to sleep standing up. The body remembers, he repeated. That's true. The train moved in the night, and they were quiet. The good quiet, the kind that settles between people who have said something important and are now giving it room. Not rushing the next word, just giving it room. Before dawn, what remains? The sky began to change, very slowly, almost imperceptibly. The darkness just became different, a little less dense, a little more transparent near the horizon, where the earth meets the sky. Something appeared that wasn't yet a colour, but was no longer black. The feeling of colour about to arrive. The earliest, quietest kind. Natasha watched this and thought, there's the border. It's always somewhere here, between night and morning, between what was and what will be. Not a sharp border, but a clear one, blurred, extended. Sometimes it seems like dawn will never come. The darkness is so deep. And then suddenly, it's already light, and you didn't notice when. That's how it is with heavy things too, she thought. You carry, and then realize it's already gone. Not disappeared, but become something else. Something you can live with, without strain. Just live. Maybe that was why Chekhov, not because it was sad, because he had this. People who carry and carry and carry and don't stop living. They live with it. Somehow they live. She looked at Daniel. He was also looking out the window at the lightening sky. In his profile there was something settled, not resolved. Settled. Different things. When something's resolved, it's closed. When it's settled, it's still there, but no longer sharp. You can. Will you call him as soon as you arrive? She asked. I think from the train, while we're still moving. He was quiet. Before I get to the platform and have to become myself again. The self who knows how to hold his face together. On the train, it's different. Here you can. Here you can, she agreed. Tell me, he said suddenly, when you were leaving that apartment, did you regret it? A strange question. She thought about it, genuinely, not rushing. No, she said. I regretted the length of time, that it wasn't sooner, that I spent time pretending it was fine instead of admitting it wasn't. It takes courage to admit that. It's frightening to admit that, she corrected. Courage is afterward, when you've admitted it and you still get up in the morning. The moment of admission itself, just frightening. He was quiet. Then I'm probably going toward my frightening right now, he said. toward admitting it, that 2 years was too long, that I was waiting for something, I don't know what, that he made the first move, and I could have. Many times I could have.
You can now too, she said. Yes. A pause. You can now too. The sky in the east had turned pink, the first real colour. Delicate, almost watercolour. The kind that looks unreal because it's too beautiful. But real. It's always like that. The most beautiful things seem unnatural because we're used to beauty being rare. But it's there, every morning. You just have to be in the right place at the right hour. Or on a night train by the window. Look, she said softly. I see, he said, also softly. They looked together, strangers who over the course of the night had become something slightly different. Not close, not friends, just fellow travellers in the truest sense of the word. People who walked beside each other for a while, his paths crossed at the right moment. That means something too. That too is rare. After the train, dawn. The station was small, a few benches, a schedule on the wall, a clerk behind the glass who was dozing with her eyes open a third of the way. From the corner came the smell of coffee, a vending machine, old but working. She bought a cup, hot, bitter, too strong, like the one they'd drunk in the compartment. She stood at the window with it. Outside, the dawn was unfolding unhurriedly. The pink on the horizon had become orange, the orange had become gold, and in that gold the fog had turned light, almost transparent. The trees behind the station stood sharp and wet with drops on the branches, each drop holding a tiny dawn inside. She took out her phone. Clara, she typed, then erased it, then typed again. Sweetheart, I'm on my way to Aunt Sophie's. Think about where you want to go next weekend. Just the two of us. A movie or the zoo or just walking. Whatever you want. She sent it. 8-year-olds don't read messages at 5 in the morning. She'd read it when she woke up. That was fine. But something inside went quieter. She thought about the man on the train, Daniel. Right now he was riding on, sitting in the same compartment with 2 cups and the Chekhov book she'd left, riding toward his father, who wrote, waiting, and is waiting. In a few hours there would be a meeting, not easy probably, but he'd go. He was already going. She believed he would call, not because he'd promised. People promise and don't call, that's normal. But because in the moment when she'd said, by voice, not a message, something in his face had changed. Something had shifted, something that had been standing still for a long time. She'd seen that. She'd been there. Outside the station window, a bird flew past, fast, low, almost level with the ground, disappeared into the fog. Then another. Then they began to sing, somewhere in the trees beyond the platform, first one, then another, then several at once. The dawn was beginning for real. She finished the coffee, threw away the cup, took out her phone one more time, dialed Sophie. 1 ring, 2, 3. Natasha? Sophie's voice was sleepy, but immediately, alive, immediately, glad. Where are you? At the station, Here, in town. A pause. Can you come? Already leaving. No why, no what happened, no I told you so. Just already leaving. Exactly this, exactly like that, is what 20 years of friendship is. She hung up, put the phone in her pocket. In the other pocket, the photograph. Clara, the swing, the sun, the white dress, looking straight ahead. She didn't take it out, just knew it was there. That was enough. Outside, it was getting light faster now. The gold from the horizon was climbing, covering the trees, covering the rooftops, laying itself on the wet platform in long stripes. In that light, the fog was dissolving. Slowly, a little at a time. Not disappearing, dissolving, the way things dissolve that were needed at night and stopped being needed with the dawn. She walked out of the station and stood on the platform, lifted her face to the light, waited. The end. Sophie. Sophie appeared in 15 minutes. She came out of the parking lot, without a coat, in a sweater, hair loose. The kind of person looks who has run out quickly without thinking about clothing, because what mattered was being quick. She saw Natasha, and her face did something that made Natasha feel something catch in her throat. Something warm, sharp. "Let me look at you," Sophie said when she got close. She took her by the hands, looked without questions, without assessment, just looked. "You're exhausted." "I haven't slept. I was on the train." "I put the kettle on." Sophie didn't let go of her hands. "Are you hungry?" "Terribly. I had soup yesterday. There's probably some left." "Sophie," said Natasha. "What?" "Just nothing, Sophie." She nodded, knowingly, without questions. Because 20 years means understanding without questions. When just nothing, just Sophie, is enough. They walked to the car. Sophie took her bag, though Natasha hadn't asked. The dawn lay across the parking lot in gold stripes. The birds were singing in full voice now, insistently, joyfully, as though the dawn were news every time, and every time good news. In the car, it was warm. It smelled of leather seats and coffee. Sophie had apparently been drinking coffee before she left. They didn't talk on the way, just drove through the dawn light, past wet trees, past houses with closed curtains, past streets still empty. The town at this hour, quiet. Traffic lights blink yellow because there are almost no cars. Pigeons on ledges sit hunched up. A street sweeper pushes leaves in front of a shop, unhurriedly, with the manner of someone who long ago understood that the leaves will come back. She looked at him and thought, that's the right approach. You sweep, knowing more will come, and you sweep anyway. Not because you'll win, just because that's how it is. Sophie stopped the car at a building entrance, a 5-story building with a small front garden where someone had planted chrysanthemums. They were still holding on, late ones, orange, slightly frostbitten, but holding. Natasha looked at them. Beautiful, she said. The neighbour downstairs, Margaret. Sophie took her bag, though she hadn't asked. She says every year, this year I won't bother planting, too much work, and every year she plants. Good that she does. Good, Sophie agreed. They went in. Elevator, 3rd floor, a door with a mailbox that had a corner of a newspaper sticking out. Sophie's apartment smelled of coffee and that particular blend of smells that comes from people who've lived in a place for a long time and no longer notice their own smell
This smell Natasha had known since she was 20. It had barely changed. Just a few more books and one more cat. The cat was sitting on the windowsill, looking at her with the same expression the owls had given Clara, as though it knew. "What's his name?" she asked. "Professor," said Sophie. "He's serious." "I can see." Professor looked at her for another second, weighed her, approved, turned back to the window. Decision made, audience over. "Here's a blanket," Sophie said. "Soup on the stove, key on the hook." She went to the kitchen. Natasha took off her jacket, took off her shoes, the same gesture as in the compartment. The first thing you do when you finally can, take off your shoes. She walked into the main room. Books on the shelves, many books, 3 rows deep, some lying on top. Photographs on the wall, Sophie young, Sophie with her mother, Sophie somewhere by the sea. A floor lamp in the corner with a warm orange light, the same colour as the night light in the compartment. She stopped by it and just stood there, then took out the photograph from her pocket. Clara, the swing, the sun in her face, and she's looking straight ahead, not squinting. 8 years old, and she can already look straight into the sun without turning away. Natasha set the photograph on the shelf, beside Sophie's books. Just like that, just so it could be seen. Then she went to the kitchen, toward the smell of soup and coffee, where Sophie was making noise with plates and saying something about how you need to eat properly, and then sleep, and then talk, and the order was optional. And Natasha listened to this voice and thought, there, that's what it's called. Arriving where you need to be. You don't know where, and then it turns out, here, to this voice, to this kitchen, to this smell. Just here. Just because. Because sometimes that's enough. The train was long gone. The dawn had come. Sophie was saying something about the soup, and for the first time in a very long time, Natasha just listened with love. Compartment 6.